Hi, my name is Annabel. I'm a PhD student at Georgia Tech, and I'm here presenting on behalf of myself, but also my co-authors, Amanda, Carl, Britney, Ben, and Betsy, our work entitled Interrogating Data Work as a Community of Practice. Why should we care about data work as a community of practice? So using Lave Wenger's concept of a community of practice, and particularly thinking about the gradient of participation within a field or within a profession, we can think about the way in which different groups are contributing to that profession at large. So in many cases, we might have novices who are more towards the periphery of the community, and by engaging in a kind of apprenticeship model, they're able to become more embedded, more experienced members of that community of practice by working with full or well-experienced members of the community. And using the community of practice to think about data work is interesting because for a long time in CSCW, including myself, we've been thinking almost about data science as being interchangeable with data work somewhat, when in fact we're starting to think about the role of subjectivity in data work, and we actually want to think about the role that data scientists play as a kind of end user of data, right? They're not often the ones who are collecting, organizing, and standardizing data. They're almost actually more as consumers of it, and then creating products that will go out to eventually affect different end users. And a great deal of human-centered data science recently has focused not only on the role of subjectivity, but also the importance of subjectivity for issues of fairness and transparency in data-intensive systems. And when we look at other groups within the data work community, particularly those who have been kind of positioned more on the periphery, we can see that there are different collaboration and contextualization practices that result from being closer to the data, but also needing to be closer with the data. And so our hope in this work is that we're able to answer, or to begin to answer, a set of questions set out by Rydal in 2019 about who are data science practitioners, right? Using practitioners in the broad sense. And how can we understand their perspective? What tools do they need? And essentially, how can we support them as a research community? We think it's important to think about the role that other groups are playing and the role that other groups are able to establish for themselves in becoming close to the data, and also thinking about the tools that those groups might need. And now, data work is a slightly unusual community of practice in that the kind of expert-novice dynamic, in fact, doesn't really exist. And what we see here is a lot of folks who are practicing data work as a means to achieving some other goal outside of the data work community of practice, right? It's not data work for the sake of doing data work. For example, they might be an affordable housing data manager, in which case they are performing data work in order to support the goals of affordable housing, right? They live kind of primarily professionally in a different domain, which would be, of course, affordable housing. And so in this case, many of our participants, who you'll hear more about in a second, aren't actually interested in becoming full members of that community, right, the data work community. But they still want to be members positioned comfortably on the periphery and receiving the support of our research community about how they can continue to be members and what kinds of tools and workflows we can help design for them. And at the same time, we as a research community can look towards the context and collaboration practices that they have developed in order to share those back with data scientists and to help data scientists achieve a greater sense or to lessen data scientists' sense of distance between themselves and the data that they work with, in order to help the data scientists better understand where that data came from. This is all, of course, to preserve the socio-technical context of a given data set and to help data scientists understand how it might be best employed. Our investigation features 19 interviews with civic data workers who are operating out of large cities in the southeastern part of the United States. They're individuals who are working at places ranging from municipal or state offices and utilities to local nonprofits where they are working with topics like affordable housing or mental and physical well-being. All of them cite data work as being a key part of their professional role. However, they don't identify as data scientists or data analysts, and in most cases don't actually have an interest in being called such or working towards being called such. When we think about the sites where civic data work is happening, it's interesting because they are traditionally underfunded areas in comparison to large tech organizations where folks like data scientists might be operating out of. So we call these low and limited resource environments. And when we look at the tools, for example, and resources that are at the disposal of civic data workers in these environments, they look very different than what we would expect, at a large tech organization, for example, and what traditional data scientists might have access to. Civic data work is also an interesting space because of all of the transparency and justice issues in data work, right? All of those things are particularly magnified, given that many of the systems are not opt-in or opt-out. They are fairly compulsory for residents of the associated district. For example, if you want water, you almost always have to go through your municipal water utility. What we learned from these interviews is important for both data scientists, but also for how we as researchers can better support a wider variety of data workers. So these civic data workers, because they're working with data that is highly contextualized, right? It's always about the city in which they are operating in, and they have to maintain that proximity to the city. They have vast collaboration and contextualization practices. So for example, if they're not actually the ones that collected that data, they figure out how to reestablish very close proximity to the site and to the individuals who actually collected that data. And this allows them to reestablish the kind of socio-technical origins of that data. They also have collaboration practices that are of assistance for this purpose. So many of them use an intermediary, or they'll talk about, for example, having to establish bonds with the data collectors themselves, right? In one case, even taking time out of their weekend to go and literally go and meet the guys in the field is how they describe it. And this is all towards establishing a kind of working relationship that's based on mutual respect. This is very different, of course, than the kind of the stereotypical state of the art in data science, where in many cases a lot of the data is mediated through large platform operators, and there's not a lot of communication between the individuals who are consuming that data, e.g. data scientists, and the individuals who are collecting that data, who, for example, might be digital piece workers like Turkers on Amazon Mechanical Turk. Two, if we're interested in building tools for collaboration, this is a fascinating population to engage with, since collaboration around data is necessary for the professional practice of these data workers. So our findings have three important implications. First, they help us to understand data work as a community of practice, which is to understand the vast variety of practitioners within the data work space, and how we as researchers can both support that variety of practitioners, but also understand their implications for the data products and data-intensive systems that result from the work of these, various groups of data workers. And we can understand better the practices of peripheral data workers or data workers on the periphery. By understanding those practices, that would be specifically thinking about collaboration and contextualization practices, we can help data scientists think about how they might reestablish that proximity to work towards goals, including, for example, data justice, and of data use, that is respective of the origins of where that data came from. Finally, as we think about data work as a community of practice, it gives us a better understanding of what kinds of tools domain experts might need, as opposed to folks who are really living primarily in the field of data scientists or in that subfield of data work. So thinking really about the needs of someone who is full-time, a data scientist, definitely a full practitioner of data work, versus folks who might be more on the periphery. Specifically, when we're thinking about low and limited resource environments, there's a real opportunity for us as researchers to build tools for, for example, data workers in the civic and nonprofit space. With thanks to our interviewees and the NSF, and please don't hesitate to reach out to speak more about this project. Thanks for listening.